What happens when a child abandoned by his own bloodline returns, not as a man, but as living fire? A night of vengeance begins, and every scream, every shadow, every flame hides a truth darker than death itself. Will he destroy the family that betrayed him, or will the fire consume him whole? Stay with me, because this story will burn in your mind till the very end. Under the blood-red sky, the gates of the ancestral mansion creaked open. The orphan returned, footsteps echoing on the cold stone path. The wind whispered like 1,000 voices, carrying scents of burning wood and damp earth. Every lantern flickered as if afraid of the presence, now walking through the courtyard. Shadows stretched long across the cracked walls, where ivy clung like veins of a dying body. The orphan's hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of memories. Abandonment, betrayal, hunger, nights spent shivering in silence. The mansion loomed larger with each step, its windows black and hollow like empty eyes. Inside, laughter once filled the grand hall, but now only the faint dripping of water broke the stillness. The air was thick, pressing against the lungs, carrying the metallic taste of rust and something older. The orphan paused, fingers brushing the carved wooden door. The wood felt alive, as though it pulsed with secrets of cruelty and pride. A low groan escaped the hinges as the door yielded, revealing the corridor beyond. The corridor stretched into darkness, lined with portraits. Faces of the family who cast him away stared down, their painted eyes gleaming in the dim light. Each gaze seemed sharper, piercing, filled with disdain that transcended canvas and oil. The orphan stepped forward, heart pounding with the rhythm of distant thunder. The silence cracked when a floorboard groaned underfoot. Suddenly, a faint rustle echoed from the far end of the corridor. It was not the wind. It was breathing. Heavy, uneven, rasping, hidden in the shadows. The orphan froze, the hairs on the back of the neck rising. The portrait seemed to lean closer, as if listening. The scent of decay grew stronger, filling the nostrils, crawling into the throat. Something shifted in the dark. A figure moved, slow, deliberate, and the sound of claws scraping against the wall followed. The orphan's breath caught in the chest. Eyes strained, searching the gloom, where the figure slithered closer. The scraping of claws carved echoes into the silence. The air thickened, sour with the stench of rot and smoke. Every heartbeat felt louder, heavier, a drum that betrayed his presence. The figure stopped, hidden behind the last portrait. A chill crawled along the orphan's spine, as though unseen fingers traced the skin. The portrait shivered on the wall, rattling against the nails. Its painted face seemed to twist, lips curving into a cruel smile. Then, a whisper, low and rasping, slithered through the air. Blood returns to blood. The orphan staggered back, heart hammering, but the door behind had shut tight. The corridor narrowed, walls pressing closer, suffocating. From the shadows, two pale hands slid into the dim light. Skin stretched thin, bones jutting sharp beneath. Claws glistened, wet with something dark. The orphan smelled iron, thick and choking. The figure stepped forward. Eyes burned like coals in a skull too hollow, too human, too monstrous. The portraits trembled, as though their painted ancestors feared the thing that now stood alive. The orphan clenched trembling fists. Revenge burned hotter than terror, even as the floor quaked under the weight of the approaching horror. The orphan stood rooted, every muscle taut, the body torn between fight and flight. The figure dragged its claws along the wall, leaving deep grooves in the wood. Sparks leapt with each scrape, tiny embers dancing before vanishing into the dark. The burning scent of ash filled the corridor, mingling with the copper tang of blood. Its steps were uneven, a shuffle and a lurch, as though pulled by invisible strings. When it spoke again, the voice carried many tones, layered with pain and malice. Forgotten child, abandoned flesh, you return to claim what was never given. The orphan's vision blurred, memories colliding with the present. A cold night beneath a torn blanket. The sound of a door slamming shut. the laughter of kin behind walls he was never allowed to enter. Now those same walls seemed to breathe, exhaling hot, rancid air. The figure leaned closer, its face half revealed in the trembling lantern light. It was not entirely human. The mouth stretched wider than bone should allow, teeth jagged like shards of broken glass. And yet the eyes bore the unmistakable mark of the family bloodline. Recognition burned in the orphan's chest like molten iron. This was no ghost. This was kin twisted into a vessel of torment. The figure raised a claw, and the corridor shuddered as if the mansion itself braced for violence. The orphan's lips curled into a grim smile, fear giving way to fury. The night of vengeance had only begun. The claw descended with a hiss, slicing the air. The orphan twisted aside, the wooden floor splintering where the strike landed. Shards flew, cutting the skin of his cheek, warm blood trickling down. Pain sharpened his focus, igniting the fire within. The figure lunged again, its movements jerky, fueled by rage and something darker. Each step shook the corridor, portraits rattling, frames crashing to the ground. Oil faces shattered, glass scattering like frozen tears. The ancestors lay broken, their painted eyes staring in silence. The orphan snatched a shard of the fallen frame, its edge sharp enough to glint. Fingers gripped tight, blood seeping where the glass bit into flesh. The figure roared, a sound that cracked the air like a beast trapped between worlds. The orphan's ears rang, vision trembling, but he did not falter. He struck. The shard pierced flesh, sinking deep into the figure's shoulder. No blood flowed. Instead, black smoke hissed from the wound, writhing like snakes released. The stench of sulfur filled the hall, choking, burning the throat. The figure laughed, a hollow sound that echoed from wall to wall. Fire cannot kill what fire has birthed. Its other claw lashed out, catching the orphan across the chest. Fabric tore, skin burned, the taste of iron flooding his mouth. He staggered, but his grip on the shard never loosened. Eyes locked with the beast, he whispered a vow that scorched the silence. "Your curse ends with me." The beast surged forward, claws slicing the air, black smoke trailing like wings of shadow. The orphan braced, lungs burning, chest torn but spirit unyielding. The corridor groaned, timbers bending, as if the mansion itself leaned closer to witness the struggle. Walls bled with cracks, dark liquid seeping, dripping in slow, deliberate rhythm. Each drop sizzled against the floor, releasing fumes of sulfur and ash. The orphan pressed his back against the trembling wall, the shard still buried in the creature's flesh. The beast seized it, twisting the glass deeper into its own shoulder, smiling with a mouth too wide. "You think pain is mine alone?" The air quivered, and the mansion answered. From every shattered portrait, whispers poured like venom. Voices of ancestors, cold and merciless, chanting his name with scorn. The orphan's vision wavered, the sound drilling into the skull, twisting memory and hate. His knees buckled, palms pressing against the burning wood beneath him. The beast loomed closer, its eyes glowing hotter, smoke billowing to choke the hall. Yet beneath the torment, the orphan felt a pulse. A rhythm hidden inside the mansion's walls, like a beating heart buried deep within the stone. The fire in his veins answered, rage rising to meet it. He dragged himself upright, chest heaving, blood staining the floor in dark streaks. His voice broke through the whispers, raw and defiant. "This house is built on my suffering. Tonight it burns." The mansion shuddered, lanterns bursting, flames licking outward from the cracks. The beast snarled, its laughter turning into a scream that split the corridor. Flames leapt from the walls, twisting upward like serpents hungry for flesh. The heat pressed against the orphan's skin, blistering, searing, yet feeding his fury. The beast staggered, smoke pouring from its wounds, its claws thrashing at the fire. But the fire clung, crawling along its limbs, wrapping it in chains of flame. The whispers from the portraits grew louder, shrill and venomous, voices wailing as their painted faces melted. Eyes dripped from canvas, mouths stretched in silent screams. the ancestors burning with the house they built. The orphan stepped forward, each stride heavy, defiant, his shadow cast huge against the firelit wall. The shard of glass glowed red in his hand, edges alive with heat. He raised it high, the reflection of the inferno dancing across his blood-stained face. The beast lunged one final time, claws wide, mouth unhinged, shrieking with rage. The orphan drove the shard deep into its chest. The impact thundered through the hall, a sound like stone splitting, like chains snapping. Black fire erupted from the wound, consuming the creature from within. It howled, a sound of 1,000 voices, before collapsing to the burning floor. Its body writhed, then cracked, splitting open into a storm of ash and shadow. The mansion screamed with it, beams breaking, ceilings collapsing, flames swallowing every corner. The orphan staggered back, chest heaving, as the ground beneath his feet split wide. Through the crack, he saw it. Beneath the mansion, a pit of writhing flame, endless, alive, waiting. And the house began to drag itself down into that pit, taking him with it. The floor groaned, pulling apart like jaws opening to devour. Flames surged upward, reaching with skeletal hands of fire. The orphan's boots slid across the tilting boards, splinters tearing into his flesh. Heat roared, swallowing breath, scalding the lungs with every gasp. The pit below churned with molten rivers, shapes twisting within, screaming, clawing, reaching. They were not strangers. They were faces he knew, faces of the family who had cast him aside, their mouths stretched in endless agony. Their hands reached up, desperate, pleading, as if begging for mercy they had never given. The orphan froze, torn between rage and revulsion, his grip tightening on the blood-stained shard. Their cries pierced him, sharper than the beast's claws. "Save us. Take our place. Carry our sin." The fire surged higher, wrapping around his legs, searing skin but feeding the hunger in his heart. The mansion shuddered, walls collapsing into the pit, portraits crashing into flame, ancestors vanishing in shrieks. The orphan stood at the edge, every muscle trembling, his shadow wavering against the inferno. The pit pulled harder, demanding his body, his soul, his vengeance. For the first time, silence pressed into his skull, a silence that asked a single question. Would he escape the fire, or become its master? The orphan's chest rose and fell, breath torn and ragged, eyes fixed on the pit. The flames licked higher, wrapping him in heat that blistered skin but did not break his resolve. The cries of his kin clawed at his ears, their faces warping in the fire, desperate, hideous, unworthy. He tasted ash on his tongue, bitter and sharp, the flavor of their ruin. His hand tightened on the shard, its red glow pulsing like a heartbeat. Every beat echoed inside him, louder, stronger, until it drowned their voices. The mansion cracked again, stone screaming as it fell into the abyss. Beams snapped, timbers burned, ceilings collapsed in thunderous bursts. The inferno surged upward, pulling harder, tugging at his feet, his blood, his very soul. Yet he did not fall. He planted his heels against the breaking floor, every vein blazing with fire that was his own. He raised the shard high, a flame within flame, a weapon forged of suffering. His voice thundered across the pit, raw, unyielding. "I was the child you abandoned. I am the fire you created." The cries below twisted into shrieks, their pleading turning to curses, their faces contorting with hate. The orphan's shadow stretched across the flames, vast, defiant, unconsumed. The pit roared, furious, as if the abyss itself was denied its prey. The fire that sought to drag him under now curled around him, circling, obeying, bowing. And for the first time, the orphan felt it, the mansion's curse no longer his chain, but his crown. The mansion's roof tore away, flung into the night sky like ashes carried by a storm. Flames burst outward, painting the heavens crimson, casting the land in a hellish glow. The orphan stood amidst the collapse, his body cloaked in fire that did not consume. The shard in his grip melted, reshaping into molten steel, a blade pulsing with the rhythm of his rage. The cries of his ancestors shriveled into silence, their faces vanishing into the pit, their power broken. The abyss raged, but its chains could no longer bind him. The fire bent to his will, coiling around him like a serpent made of light and shadow. The floor crumbled, the last of the mansion sliding into the pit with a roar of thunder. And yet, the orphan did not fall. He rose. Lifted by the fire itself, his feet left the collapsing boards, his figure carried upward through smoke and ruin. The night air hit him, sharp and cold, clashing with the inferno that burned within. Below, the mansion vanished into the abyss, swallowed whole, leaving only a crater of flame and darkness. Above, the sky seemed to tremble at his ascent, clouds boiling, moonlight drowned in red glow. The orphan's eyes burned brighter than the fire that crowned him. Every nerve, every scar, every wound became fuel for the storm now at his command. And, in that moment, he understood. He was no longer the forgotten child. He was vengeance given flesh, fire given breath. The orphan hovered above the smoking crater, the earth trembling beneath the weight of his rebirth. The night was silent, yet the silence carried dread, as though the world itself held its breath. The fire curled tighter around him, whispering promises of ruin, urging him forward. He descended, boots striking scorched soil, the ground hissing beneath his steps. The blade of molten steel pulsed, veins of light coursing across its surface, like living fire. His gaze lifted to the horizon where distant lights flickered, villages, towns, untouched by the mansion's curse. They slept in peace, unaware of the storm that had risen from the ashes. The orphan's lips parted, and a bitter laugh escaped, low and sharp, swallowed quickly by the night. He could still hear their voices, his kin who had thrived while he starved, their laughter echoing in memory. Now their legacy would meet the fire. The air thickened, carrying the acrid scent of smoke far beyond the ruins. Animals fled the forests, birds scattering in frantic waves across the sky. The wind itself bent to him, fanning the flames that trailed at his heels. Each step forward scorched the earth, blackening grass, turning trees into pillars of ash. The night no longer belonged to the stars. It belonged to him, the forgotten child, the heir of fire. And his march toward the bloodline that betrayed him had only begun. The orphan's march carved a burning path across the sleeping land. Villages stirred as distant smoke rose, dogs howling, windows shuddering in fear. The sky glowed red, clouds lit from below, as if dawn had come too soon. But it was no dawn. It was the herald of ruin. The fire bent around him, never consuming his flesh, yet devouring everything his shadow touched. Trees bowed, their branches snapping, collapsing into embers as he passed. Streams hissed into vapor, their waters fleeing from the heat. He did not look back. Ahead, across the rolling fields, the spires of another mansion rose against the dark sky. Taller, prouder, and scathed by the curse that had swallowed the first. This was where his kin lived, the bloodline that had flourished while he was cast into hunger. He slowed, his breath steady, his eyes fixed on the towering gates of iron. Guards stood ready, lanterns flickering in their hands, unaware of the inferno approaching. The earth quaked beneath his steps, each stride heavier, louder, until even the iron gate began to tremble. The guards raised their voices, shouting, weapons lifted. But their cries were drowned by the roar of fire. The orphan lifted his blade, molten steel humming with a hunger of vengeance. And with a single swing, the gates of iron melted, sagging like wax beneath the heat. The estate awoke in chaos. Torches lit, bells rang, voices screamed in confusion and terror. The orphan stepped inside, the fire trailing at his heels, his shadow stretching long across the cobblestones. And for the first time, his family would look upon the child they had abandoned, returned as a storm of fire, the courtyard filled with shouts, servants scattering like frightened birds. Steel clashed as guards rushed forward, blades raised, eyes wide with disbelief. The orphan did not slow. His molten blade carved arcs of light through the air, each strike bursting with fire that devoured flesh and steel alike. Armor melted, swords bent, screams split the night as the inferno claimed its first living victims. The cobblestones glowed red beneath their ashes. Beyond the chaos, tall doors swung open at the top of the stairs. Figures emerged, his blood, his kin, their silks gleaming in the firelight, their jewels trembling on pale throats. Gasps and curses rippled among them as they recognized his face. The child they had forgotten. The shadow they had buried. Now standing reborn in fire, crowned by vengeance. One voice rose above the rest, sharp and commanding. The patriarch. Hair silver, eyes cruel, the same eyes that had once turned away from a starving boy. His voice thundered down the steps. You are no son of this house. You are a curse. The orphan's lips curled, not in grief, but in fury sharpened into resolve. The fire swelled, flaring higher than the mansion walls, casting their faces in terror. His answer came, low, cutting through the roar of flame. I am what you made me. The patriarch raised his hand, and more guards surged forward, armored ranks flooding the courtyard. But the orphan lifted his blade, and the fire itself bent to him, swirling into a storm that roared outward. The first wave vanished in an instant, consumed, leaving only blackened shadows etched into stone. The family on the stairs recoiled, their silks igniting at the edges, their jewels reflecting the fire like drops of blood. The orphan advanced, each step echoing like a drumbeat of doom. The orphan climbed the stairs, fire rolling at his heels like a living tide. His kin shrank back, clutching one another, faces pale against the stormlight. The patriarch did not move. His gaze held steady, though the fire reflected in his eyes betrayed the fear he would never speak. The orphan stopped 2 steps below him, the molten blade humming with heat, dripping sparks onto the stone. The air between them tightened, heavy with the weight of years unspoken. At last, the patriarch's voice cut through the crackle of fire. You wear power like a crown, but you are still nothing. Still a bastard. Still forgotten. The words struck, sharp as any blade. But they did not break him. The orphan's breath came slow, steady, every word burning as it left his lips. I begged once for your hand. I begged once for a place at your table. Tonight I do not beg. Tonight I take. Gasps rippled among the family, silks rustling as they pressed against the walls, eyes wide with terror. The patriarch's hand lifted, not in surrender, but in defiance. A hidden dagger gleamed, its hilt etched with symbols, old and cruel. The orphan's gaze narrowed. He knew that blade. It was the same one raised against his mother before the night she vanished. The memory struck like lightning, searing, undeniable. The fire around him raged higher, the storm answering his fury. The patriarch bared his teeth, stepping forward, dagger raised high. This house was built on blood. Yours will be the last. The orphan lifted his molten blade, fire shrieking as it split the air. And the 2 generations of hate collided in a storm of steel and flame. Steel met fire in an explosion of light and sound. The patriarch's dagger struck the molten blade, sparks bursting, searing the air. The impact shook the stairs, stone cracking beneath their feet. The orphan pressed forward, every strike a storm, every swing a scar across the night. The patriarch moved with surprising strength, his dagger weaving arcs of silver through the fire. Each symbol on the blade burned, resisting the heat, hissing against the molten steel. The clash rang like thunder, echoing through the mansion, shaking the walls to their foundation. Families screamed, scattering, tripping over their silks as flames leapt across the hall. The patriarch's eyes gleamed with fury, but also with something colder. Something hidden. You think I cast you aside because you were weak, he spat, his voice cracking as steel scraped steel. The orphan snarled, shoving him back, fire scorching the stairwell. You cast me aside because you feared me. The patriarch's laugh came bitter, hollow, dripping venom.
No.
I cast you aside because you were never meant to live." The words sliced deeper than any blade. The orphan froze for a heartbeat, rage tangled with shock, his grip faltering. The patriarch struck, the dagger slashing across his arm, searing flesh. Pain blazed, hot and sharp, but fury returned tenfold. The orphan's eyes burned brighter, his blade roaring alive, molten fire spilling across the steps. The mansion shook, windows shattering, pillars cracking, portraits bursting into flame. "Then tonight," the orphan roared, his voice shaking the rafters, "you die for every breath you stole from me." Their blades collided again, and the inferno screamed with them, as though the house itself was fighting to contain their wrath. The patriarch's dagger slashed again, carving arcs of silver against the raging fire. The orphan countered, molten blades striking with the force of an earthquake, each blow cracking stone beneath their feet. The air between them boiled, fire and smoke coiling like serpents around their bodies. The patriarch's face twisted, sweat pouring down, but his eyes remained sharp, unyielding. "You are not air," he hissed, forcing the dagger forward, its symbols blazing brighter. "You are a mistake. A curse." The orphan's fury erupted, the fire bending to his roar, surging up the walls, devouring the ceiling beams. "I am the curse made flesh. I am the fire you feared." He drove his blade down, the molten edge clashing with the dagger. The impact split the stairwell, stone cracking wide, chunks falling into the flames below. The patriarch staggered, knees buckling, yet still clung to the dagger with iron grip. Blood streamed from his arm, skin blistering under the fire's heat. But he laughed, cruel and broken. "You think this ends with me? You know nothing of the blood you carry." The orphan faltered, the words striking like hidden blades. The fire around him hesitated, its storm wavering, waiting for his will. The patriarch pressed the dagger close, whispering through clenched teeth, "Your mother's death was no accident. She begged me to end you before the fire inside you grew." The world tilted. The orphan's chest heaved, pain and rage colliding, his grip trembling. The fire surged wild, uncontrolled, tearing through the walls, swallowing screaming kin as they fled. The patriarch's dagger inched closer, its tip burning against the orphan's chest. But the orphan's molten blade shone brighter, a sun breaking in his hands. With a roar, he swung, fury breaking chains of doubt, every wound and every betrayal exploding into one strike. The molten blade cleaved downward, a streak of fire splitting the dark. Steel shrieked as it met the dagger, shattering symbols, breaking ancient wards with a sound like bones splintering. The patriarch's eyes widened, disbelief cutting deeper than pain. The dagger split in two, fragments glowing white before crumbling into ash. The fire surged, swallowing his arm, racing up his body like a living beast unleashed. He screamed, voice raw, echoing through the collapsing halls. The orphan stood over him, chest heaving, blade still humming with molten fury. The patriarch's flesh burned, silks ignited, jewels melted against blistering skin. Yet through the flames, his voice clawed its way out, jagged, defiant. "You think you are free? Fool. The fire does not serve you. You serve it." The orphan's heart pounded, his grip faltered for a breath. The flames around him flickered, whispering in tones only he could hear. The patriarch's face, half consumed, twisted into a final grin. "Your mother knew." She tried to smother the spark before it grew. But it was already too late. "You were born to burn." The orphan's vision blurred, fury and doubt tearing at his mind. The mansion groaned, beams splitting, fire devouring every corner. The patriarch's body crumbled into ash, collapsing into the flames below, leaving only his echo in the orphan's ears. "Born to burn." The words throbbed with the beat of the fire itself, louder, heavier, as if the inferno itself claimed them as truth. The orphan's blade trembled in his hand, its molten glow pulsing in rhythm with his heart. Around him, the last walls of the estate collapsed, dragging kin and legacy alike into the abyss of fire. He stood alone on the fractured stairs, the storm raging, the choice pressing upon him. Would he rule the fire as master, or surrender and become its vessel forever? The storm of fire raged, tearing sky from earth, until only the orphan remained at its center. The mansion was gone, reduced to ash and embers, its proud towers devoured by the abyss. No voices of kin remained. No laughter. No curses. Only silence broken by the crackle of flame. The molten blade in his hand pulsed once more, then cooled, solidifying into black steel veined with faint red glow. The fire circled him like a crown, no longer screaming, no longer demanding. It waited. The orphan closed his eyes, breath ragged, the weight of vengeance pressing heavy on his shoulders. He had come as the forgotten child. He had burned as the curse they named him. Now, as the embers settled, he opened his eyes to the night beyond. The stars pierced through the smoke, cold and distant, untouched by ruin. He stepped from the wreckage, the earth blackening under his feet, the fire trailing behind but not consuming. The wind carried away the last whispers of his bloodline, scattering them into nothing. No chains bound him now. No house. No name. Only the fire and the path ahead. And so he walked into the dark horizon, the night bending to his shadow, the world forever marked by the child who returned in flame. The tale of the orphan ended with silence, but his legend began with fire.